Hello everyone! I have a new video for you today featuring the Winter Friends stamp set by Pretty Pink Posh. Yes, Pretty Pink Posh has now stamp sets, also matching die sets for the stamp sets, but I'm only going to be using the stamp sets today. Actually, I'm only going to be using this bauble. I've already prepared a bit by die cutting this shape with the decorative tag die 1 from Pretty Pink Posh out of watercolor paper, and I mounted the stamp on my acrylic block. I'm using, I think this is antique linen, probably check the product description below, to stamp the image, because I want a very light water-based ink that will make it easy to color on top of. Now, this card was inspired by a card that I saw, I think it was last year, that was done by Dawn from W+9. She had colored some Christmas baubles with watercolor in an amazing way, and I have been practicing forever to do this as well, but I'm not able to. I can't reproduce what she is doing with regular watercolors. So I thought I'd be cheating a little bit and use my Inktense pencils, because they give me more control over where the color goes, where the water goes, and I was able to somewhat recreate that effect, so I was quite happy about that. So I'm just continuing to stamp out my baubles here, and I'm masking them off partly to because I want this effect that some are in the foreground and some are in the background. And this video is, on the longer side, and I didn't want to cut anything out because I wanted you to actually see what I was doing. Because I'm sometimes, frustrated when I see somebody do something and then they cut something out and I don't know how they got from A to B. So that's why it's a little bit longer. I sped the coloring process up, so you won't be totally bored. I'll be playing some music for you, but I'll be walking you through the first stages. So I'm starting out by putting down just a tiny bit of color with my Inktense pencils. I'm using a very light hand. I'm not applying a lot of pressure, because if you work that pigment into the grooves of the watercolor paper, you might not be able to get it out properly with your water brush. And that's why I'm using a very light hand, and I'm only applying a little bit of color because I want to build the color up in layers. I'm not yet sure what I will do or how it will look like, so that's why I want to err on the side of caution. So I'm taking my brush here. I think that's a number 2 brush, so it's not the tiniest one possible, but it's still a pretty small one. And I'm using a generous amount of water and activating the color and dragging it out. And you can see that the color wash that I get is extremely light. You have to look closely to even see it, and that's okay. I know that I will be adding more color, and I only want to add a little bit of color now so I can see where the shadow areas are and where the highlight areas will be. And sorry for turning the paper around, but I find that if I color with the wet tip to where the color is, like the wet tip of the brush touches where the color is, I have much better results when I color than when I do it any other way. So that's why I have to turn my paper. Sorry. So I'm doing the same thing here that I did on the red bauble. I'm again using my water to draw the color out, and you can see that my light source, if the tag would be the right way, like not upside down as it's now, my light source would come from the upper left. So I've actually dried this piece with my heat gun for a little bit to make sure it's completely dry, and then I went back with the pencils and added some more color. Not very much, just in the shadow area, and I'm blending this out once more with my brush here and intensifying the shadow areas. And I'm being very careful here because I'm still not entirely sure how much color I'll want to add, or how intense I would want this to go. And I'm doing the same thing here with the blue, again accentuating the shadow areas. And you can see here, by using a very light ink to stamp with, I can totally color over this little hook there, so it will completely disappear by the time I'm done. I was a little bit braver here, added a little bit more pigment with my Inktense pencils, and I'm blending this out as well. And you can see that whenever I think the pigment is getting too intense, I'm wiping my brush off to the side or cleaning it with clean water, and then I'm drawing the color out a little bit more. But I'm trying not to pull the pigment too far. I've dried it once more off to the side, and now I'm being a little bit braver here, adding quite a bit of color with my pencil, because now I feel more confident that I want a really dark shadow in that area, and then go over to a really light highlight on the upper left. Okay, I think I've explained enough for you now. I will start some music for you, and I'll hope that you will enjoy the process. I'll catch you on the flip side to show you how I finished the card. For this very last step, I actually added a little red down here, and I'm going to be adding a little blue at the top, as that's something that I learned from Dawn from W+9 as well in her coloring video, because the red would reflect in the green and the blue would also reflect in the green, because the green bubble is behind the other two. But you can see I'm only adding the tiniest amount of color there, so you have a hint of a reflection, but it's not overwhelming. It's just a little detail that you can add, and I think it adds actually quite a bit to the overall impression. Neat, isn't it? Now for the little hooks, I actually took a dark gray pencil, and you can see I only traced this little holding thingy and the hook partially. And you can see why these pencils are called Inktense pencils. You can see how intense the color is that I get from just that little bit of pigment. Of course, I had dried my piece completely before I did that, because otherwise I would run the risk that the dark color from the hook would actually go into the color of like the bauble that it's covering up. So you can see I'm being very careful here, and it works just fine. I start to put the entire card together. I'm taping down this piece here because it's a little warped from the watercoloring, and I don't want it to come up when I stamp my sentiment after all the work that I've put into it. And this is a sentiment from the same stamp set. It says Sending Holiday Cheer, and it fits just perfectly on this tag here. And I'm using Versamark ink because that's dark. I traced the shape of the tag onto a little piece of craft cardstock that I die cut with another die by Pretty Pink Posh, and they're all listed in the video description below. So it will look like my tag is casting a shadow here. It's just a little effect that I thought would, add to the overall effect of the card. And then I put some ATG adhesive on the back of my tag, and I'm adhering it to this craft piece. All done. At least this part is all done. Now I'm creating my own glitter paper. I'm using some strips of adhesive sheet on this piece of white cardstock, and I'm covering that up with some glitter. And I'm not covering up the entire piece because most of it will be covered. You could do it. It doesn't cost you that much more glitter. I'm just cheap. And I enjoy the extra work. So here's the piece, and then I die cut it with some Lawn Fawn scalloped rectangle dies, and this will be my mat for this craft piece, just to add some subtle glitter to the card, and that's it. And I'm going to mount these together with some ATG adhesive. Now I then decided spontaneously that I wanted to have some blue sky behind the baubles, so I'm just wetting the surface area here and picking up some color from my Inktense pencil, and you can see how wet the surface is. You can see how the color immediately starts to run, and I just want to give the baubles some background here too, so they are not on a completely white tag. And I'm fading this out towards the bottom, so the upper part of the tag is much darker than the lower part. Now I grabbed another piece of watercolor cardstock, and I'm wrapping a piece of ribbon all around it. It's just, ribbon is festive, and it's a Christmas card, so of course I have to use a ribbon for that. I'm using generous amounts of glue because you really don't want this to come apart in the mail. And then I'm applying some foam adhesive here on my front part, being generous here as well because, as I said, I don't want this to come apart. I put so much work into it. And then I'm putting this on the front of my card because it's the front and center piece, of course. And it wasn't quite straight, so I'm just lifting it up again, and then I'm putting it down and pressing down really hard. Of course, I had to adhere some sequins to this card. You can find out which sequins I used in the video description below. It's just some festive cheer, and I love these gold stars. They are just so beautiful. They just add something special to each project. And here's a close-up of my baubles. You can see that I actually traced the hook, no, not the hook, but I drew in the string with my Stardust gel pen. It's just a little detail. And here you can see that I also added some dots with my Stardust gel pen around the sequins and a little star that I added. And you see the nice stitching detail that you get from the tags by Pretty Pink Posh. And here's the entire card. Very festive, lots of layers, but I think that's totally okay for the Christmas season. It looks like a little present that you give someone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've had fun, and I'll catch you again soon. Bye bye!